Sebastian. How are you doing?
Good. Looking forward to the second catch up of the year,
Yeah,
where we get to talk without guests. We love our guests, but it's also nice to just have a conversation with you.
yeah. And that's
Um,
how we started
yeah,
out, right?
that's how we started out. And we got good feedback on the last one we did, so we decided to do it again. And as always, we've prepared some topics individually. I don't know what you have prepared. I expect, as always, that there's overlap, but also definitely things that you don't have on your list. I can tell you that.
Yeah, because you always have
Um,
wild cards.
yeah, but sometimes they're very wild. This time they're a little bit less wild, but still interesting.
Okay.
Um, do you want to kick us off? Where do you want to go
I
first?
actually want to use it. Okay, I can do it, but my list is not very long, so I thought if you start, we get to go through more. But in the end,
I have
it's
enough for the
both of
half
us
hour,
anyway.
so yeah, don't worry about that.
So I was speaking at the conference by Carbon Capture and Storage Association yesterday in Brussels. And I was moderating a panel on CDR policy, accelerating the deployment in Europe. And there were some topics that kind of stayed with me from the conversation there that I thought would be great to bring up here today. One of them is, and I'm sure it's probably also on your lists, is the member state CDR targets that we are expecting to see towards the end of the year. And specifically, what I found interesting was that so we had, as usual, several people in the panel, and oftentimes people in these panel discussions, they're kind of just echoing each other. But on this specific topic, on like how much these targets matter and how should this look um, like I heard someone saying that, yes, this is great, it's very important. And someone else saying that, well, no, this is kind of almost like a distraction or not that important at all. It's much more important to focus on the ETS integration and these member state targets. It's only focused on the areas that are under member state control and not on the scope of the ETS, which is kind of outside of those targets. Hence, they're not as relevant and maybe shouldn't get that are not as impactful, I would say. What do you
What's your
think?
take?
I don't
Well,
know. We'll start with you.
I've heard that argument. I think there's a couple of arguments why member state targets could be tricky, especially in the implementation. But to me, it's a net positive if we have 27 countries forced to figure out how to achieve a certain volume of CDR by 2040. I don't see how that can be negative. And on the positive, I actually think it will lead to a much bigger diversity in terms of policies, approaches, technologies covered. So I see it very positively. I see mostly the criticisms are on the political, on the how realistic it is to implement it politically.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. But from a pure kind of how do we scale the industry, it seems a net positive to me. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I totally agree with you. For me, country targets, whether we have EU level targets or country targets, these are, I would say, the most important policy tools where everything kind of trickles down from there, because these targets are then these mechanisms that kicks in all the different policy tools that will be used to achieve the targets and so on. Yes, it's true. It's not going to be for the ETS scope, but there is, first of all, ETS doesn't cover that much of the EU emissions. I think last I know, the ETS one is like 45%, which means majority are actually outside of that. Of course, then there's a question around like ETS2 and like where exactly would you put that. But also, like, I totally agree that this is where the member states will have to, and even those who haven't maybe done enough thinking on it, they will have to figure out what kind of removals and how much actually makes sense to try to scale on their territories.
Exactly.
And they will all have different challenges and opportunities, the same way as with emission reductions. There, some countries have the biggest emissions from agriculture sector, other from transport, others from I don't know, in Estonia, we used to have oil and gas emissions that were the majority. Hence, any kind of policies to help reduce looked quite different. And the removal capacity is also going to be different, right? So not every country can rely on BECS the way Sweden does, for example. So they will need to look at other things. And it's such an important learning curve to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, in my experience, it is so helpful to then have EU level policies complemented by member state level policies to really kind of cover, like fill all the gaps and really help to get certain technologies up and running. So in my view, hugely important because yes, we do expect there to be targets not only for the sector, only for those activities that fall under the LULUCF sector, but also beyond, right? For novel removals, that would be something to watch out for.
And one thing that I've been doing more and more thinking on is also nature-based removals. And because what I see is that there's kind of, at the moment, the only pie that people see is the ETS. And it's a fairly limited pie when you think about technologies. It's DAX and BECS to start with. We'll see about biogen in the future. Everything else is out, right? And but you constantly see people trying to fight into that bucket because it's the only thing they see. And I actually think it could take a lot of pressure out of that if we had a much more diverse opportunity set, right? 27 pies of all different flavors. And that's why I think this could be really big. And it could actually target attention on things that are more productive than everyone trying to get into the ETS. So yeah, I think we should all work on that intensely.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, ETS integration is great, but it's not the be all and end all, and it's not supposed to be, right? So yes, I'm really, really excited about. I mean, hopefully, what will come out towards the end of this year is going to be something very useful, and also something that potentially other jurisdictions can learn from.
We've already touched on it, but obviously, I mean, it's 1st of July. We're recording this today. We have to talk about the ETS integration, right? That's obviously what everyone's thinking about right now. And there's a lot of different aspects to that. But when we focus on CDR, the things that I'm really looking forward to seeing is especially if the Commission is going to be explicit about amounts already in the proposal. There was a very interesting Ariadne dossier from some of the Potsdam Institute folks recently that kind of modeled how different volumes of CDR integrated between 40 and 80 megatons per year by 2040, what impact that could have on ETS prices. And essentially it's almost like it has a stabilizing effect. That was the takeaway. I've heard rumors that the Commission is looking at similar volumes. I don't know if that's actually true and if that's actually what's going to end up in the proposal. But that's what I'm really keen to see. Because if they don't put volumes, then we have another year or two of negotiations to actually figure out if this is going to make any difference to the sector or not. But yeah, how are you looking at the whole volume question at all?
Well, that's one of the elements we need to get clarity on. I just checked back on my blog. The very first time I wrote about integrating removals in the EU ETS, like specific blog post on that, it's actually now 4.5 years ago. Time goes fast. It was the winter of 2022. And I mean, many of the key elements are the same, including, on top of the cap, under the cap. But then also I wrote kind of a follow-up post on this, I think maybe a year later, where I specifically, highlighted these elements that need to be clarified, like including quality, quantity, and so on. So there's... I will be basically evaluating the proposal against the elements I had listed out back then and to see if I'm able to get answers on all of this. Given how much the discussion has matured since, right? Especially, I would say, in the last 6 to 9 months, we've seen very detailed, very well-informed, very analytical papers on CDR integration in ETS. Whereas there was a time at some point where the whole conversation seems to be around whether we need to have European Central Carbon Bank or not. and it felt
I
like
remember.
everything else was kind of a sideshow. Luckily, we're out of that. We're out of that phase, and now we're really looking at everything that we need to have answered. So yes, quantity definitely one of the key elements that needs to be clarified, because without this, I mean, we cannot judge if there's going to be impact at all, and all these hopes of what this integration could mean are for nothing.
And one other thing, I'll just plug it, because actually tomorrow on the 2nd, I'm publishing a peer-reviewed research paper with the American University on what we can do with the ETS more holistically. We think a lot about the integration, but there's actually really interesting proposals right now in Brussels around leveraging the future revenue from ETS to unlock much more funding through bonds from the European Investment Bank, and thereby being able to front load a lot of investment into green technologies. It's a super interesting concept that's gaining a lot of traction, but in that discussion, nobody's talking about CDR. And so we did essentially an exercise where we show what would happen if some of that front-loading envelope was invested in CDR, what impact would it have versus not, over what time frame. Because again, there's the integration, but the ETS can have a much broader impact on CDR beyond the integration, and we should start thinking about those other mechanisms. So again, by the time this comes out, this will be published, so everyone can go check it out. But I'm spending quite a bit of headspace on not just the integration, but what we can do beyond it.
Yeah. One of the challenges there is the amount of different types of climate solutions that are looking at ETS revenues as a potential funding source, because, and like even beyond that, for many politicians, that seems to be this one place. This is one shop to rate for anything, so it needs to be very, very well thought through where actually this funding is going to be used, and how going forward. There are going to be, obviously, I would expect some changes, but it has to be very, very smartly done.
Where are we going next? Do you want to go? Should I go?
Yeah, I mean, another thing that's, again, I mean, I've been keeping an eye on this for a while, but I kind of didn't realize that maybe it is not going as well as we expected for the removals community, is the review of the refueled aviation regulation. So the sustainable aviation fuel mandates that, when they were when the regulation was adopted, this was insanely ambitious, and it was clear that this review should, bring some sense into what these targets should look like. But specifically for the CDR community, it also meant that this would be the chance to potentially introduce CDR into the mix, because it just makes so much sense and would be a win-win across the board. What I heard yesterday was that the DG Move, who is responsible for this file, is really not keen at looking at CDR, which means that I think the timeline, we are expecting something to come out early next year. There's not that much time left, actually. I think the sector should seriously mobilize and do better capacity building on why this makes sense and how best to integrate removals into that upcoming. I hope there's going to be a legal proposal, legislative proposal.
Not surprised though, for two reasons. One is that I've heard a lot that it was such a lift to get this off the ground in the first place, and it's fairly recent, and so I understand the hesitancy by the Commission to introduce something new so early on, right? So that's the one aspect, but the other one is the advocacy from CDR kind of sucks on this front, right? Like I've seen almost nothing on it, and nobody seems to take ownership of it, and so I'm not surprised that nothing's happening.
That's the problem. Everyone is expecting that someone else is doing it because obviously it makes sense and this should happen. But it seems to me that while everyone is expecting it to happen, no one is actually doing it. So I don't know. Do we need to have a CDR for for aviation coalition or something. I don't know, Sebastian. You're putting initiatives together here.
I know, but I'm a bit busy right now. But it is a huge opportunity, right? And I think people should
Yeah.
seriously consider it.
Just look at the
Because
demand potential from that.
exactly.
Huge.
Even a small percent, if they allowed whatever, 5-10% instead
Oh,
of ESAF to be CDR, it would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, even smaller percentages, like all of this would have a major impact. And it's just such a pity to learn that, like, we've known this is coming for a long time. We have known that CDR makes so much sense. I mean, even people working on that space, they talk about CDR next to SAF oftentimes now. And suddenly the policymakers who are actually working on the proposals, they haven't really been able to internalize this. And I do say that, like, the work is cut out for the CDR sector, and someone somewhere should be taking the ownership.
I mean, carbon gap NAP, right? Like
Yeah.
we have, it's just a matter of prioritization and whether they think it's important enough.
You are affiliated with NAP.
I am on their board.
Yeah.
And definitely talking about this topic. But it is one that, yeah, we have teams working on European policy, and maybe they should look at this too. Let's move. Didn't have this on my list, so that's great. The next one I have here is international credits. Just because obviously that's still top of mind. I guess my big question that I wanted to pose to you is, there seems to be this assumption that 6.4 is kind of going to solve all our problems. And at the same time, 6.4 is yet very undefined.
That assumption?
I mean, when you hear about what quality criteria are we going to use in the future for international credits, the attention gravitates very quickly to 6.4.
I keep hearing 6.4 plus different eligibility criteria, which could make the criteria, which could make the filter a lot stricter.
Okay, but
it's true. It's a starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a starting point, and my point remains that we don't, for removals. I mean, we don't really have those methodologies today, right? So it seems like we're banking quite heavily on something that in future we don't even know what it's going to look like. So I wanted to get your take, because obviously the foundations for 6.4 have been set, and you're much deeper in the topic. So do you feel that this is a viable route that is currently being taken, or do you deem it risky potentially?
Well, we do hear from the Paris Agreement Trading Mechanism supervisory body that that they are going to ramp up work on methodologies. My impression is that some removal methodologies are about to be submitted to the methodological expert panel. I mean, given the timeline, I would say I would expect that there will be some removal methods under that mechanism in the next years, which is in time, I would say, depending on what the plans are with the pilot phase. But yeah,
they will be as good as we hope.
Ideally, they should be better, right? Even better. I mean, it's like the system, the whole mechanism has very heavy documentation. And I think so far, if you read the criticism on the CRCF, there were concerns that the CRCF methodologies are not as good as the rules of the Paris Agreement Creating Mechanism, which is the 6.4. So, I mean, I understand some of these challenges have been addressed since, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. In one sense, it's clearly limiting. In the other sense, it would be completely insane to create yet another standard or something.
Well, there would be alternatives, right? Like an obvious one.
Because it can't be just CRCF, because it's not about only removals; it's about reductions and removals. So it doesn't make sense to just focus on one thing.
But yeah, this is for me an interesting one. I'm curious, especially by the end of the year when we see the proposal on the quality criteria by the
For
Commission,
me, the big
how
question
heavy they're
is
going to lie on it.
what's going to be there on top of the requirements of 6.4,
It's hard to
if
say if we don't
anything.
have the requirements yet, right?
No, but 6.4 rules are in place. It's just the methodologies to be built under it. But there's a long. I mean, the amount of documentation there is is heavy already today, right?
Okay, so yeah, we'll see what comes out there, but yeah, that's one thing that I am watching. What do you have on your list next?
My list is finished.
Okay, I can bring in more things.
I was counting
I
on you.
But yeah, I can keep us going. One thing that I thought was really interesting was the NOAX, the Norwegian auction scheme for carbon capture that was announced recently, right? And it's up for consultation until August, which is kind of Norway's. I'd heard that Norway wanted to kind of create an answer to 45Q in the US for a while. It took a different shape now. It's not a tax credit, it's a reverse auction, right? But it's very sizable. It's 1.7 billion. It's not just CDR, it also covers quite a broad range of CCS. But I thought this was really interesting because it's up to 340 euros per ton. It has very long timelines. It goes up into the 2040s, so it has kind of that long-term horizon that project developers like. But what I found curious was that, I mean, it's up for consultation, but that currently it only looks at facilities of 5 kilotons per year or more, which for direct air capture is actually pretty high. And so while they explicitly talk about direct air capture, the requirements, both in terms of the money that they would give is a bit too little, and the facility requirements are a bit too high. And so, yeah, that's something that I'm curious if they're actually going to end up attracting direct air capture companies to Norway with this, or if they're going to change those requirements. But overall, great. Another Nordic country putting billions into CCS and CDR, right? It's a great sign.
I'm really, I mean, it's so great that they're doing it. And I'm curious now that we have quite a few countries having different programs in place that can be used to fund CDR, at times also CCS. Eventually, I'm hoping that we will get, like, someone will do a study on like the best elements of the best programs, and then eventually everything new that's created is informed by the experience already achieved from the existing ones, and we will kind of have this super efficient mechanism that countries can establish and that just works.
Evan, you've worked in government. I think you know this is pretty unlikely. Like, this rarely happens, which is really frustrating, right? Like, I see it already that those
Someone
connections
should
just don't happen.
someone should try, right? And I mean, we have plenty of passionate stakeholders. Um, yeah, I think it's worth exploring because it is true. Obviously, every country will try to do things their own way, also because they can. But sometimes they do it their own way because they just like, yeah, they don't have a formal way of learning from what the others have been doing. So if we can somehow make it easy for new countries, even if they're not putting, if they don't, the funding is not going to be as large as what the likes of Sweden and Norway are doing. Still, like, even if it's 500 million, I mean, can be huge. But it also has to be something that is that really is impactful and can deliver, and you don't end up with kind of either no no applications or just completely oversubscribed, or there has to be a right balance.
And maybe this is a good shout out to Mission Innovation and Juho and his group, because I mean, that sounds like a great platform for peer learning on these programs. They're probably doing this already, but I've just noticed that there's quite a few schemes being set up in Europe. And when you talk to those government stakeholders and they're like, yeah, but we don't know how to do this. And you're like, they've done it there 2 years ago. Like, have you spoken to them? And usually the answer is no. So I couldn't agree more that we need to have those links
Yeah,
across Europe.
that's actually a really good point. So they're currently working on carbon management project awards, and I'm in the committee choosing the projects. And I mean, I think it's just the Mission Innovation CDR bringing the governments together. It's such a great, it's just a great forum to share learnings. All across the globe. There's so much that is like easily transferable experience, and such an important work that he's doing.
Yeah, so let's hope that they can take this on as well. The next one I had here, we spoke a bit about aviation. I've been doing more work on CORSIA again. And CORSIA is an interesting one because on paper, it's kind of this pretty significant compliance market, right? Like the volumes on paper are really big. 200 megatons, I think, by 2028, and then 2 gigatons by 2035. Like it's huge amounts. And there's a compliance market, and airlines are already buying. But then when you look at the details, I see so many kind of gaps, right? And so many things that, and one thing that I wasn't aware of, for example, until recently, is just how loose. And again, if there's a CORSIA expert out there, please send us afterwards a correction, because I don't want to say anything wrong. But the enforcement of it seems so weak that essentially enforcement is down to the nation states or to specific geographies. And Europe, for example, has an enforcement of 100 euros a ton, which is the highest I've seen. But Brazil has 8 euros a ton. The US has nothing. And so if you're an American airline, why would you buy CORSIA credits if there's no enforcement at home in case you don't, right? And so then on top, the second thing that right now is very interesting with CORSIA is the ETS review, right? Because Europe is considering bringing in international flights, which is creating a lot of uncertainty on the CORSIA.
They're always considering.
And they're always considering. They're probably not going to do it, right? It's a political minefield, but still, that's just the possibility of that is creating a lot of uncertainty. And that uncertainty could last for years.
I mean, it's
on the
because
prices that it has.
Because in practice, so we started with the first stop the clock back in 2012, right? So that's already 14 years ago, which was the first time where we went to the narrower scope, and we've said that we're going to expand the scope back to all international flights if we don't have an international mechanism that works properly. And then I would say, X amount of years, every 3-4 years, we are revising it. Back during Estonian presidency, I actually was leading the trilogues on another ETS review from the aviation side, where again we kept the scope narrowed. There has been one since, and then another one now. I don't think it's just you can to some extent use it for political leverage, but I don't think now that we have CORSIA, although I'm very shocked to learn that the enforcement is so poor. I actually haven't looked into it. I don't think there is any threat in reality that the scope will be expanded to international flights, because we know what happened back in 2012 and what the political threats were from different parts of the world. No one is going to explore that again.
Okay. I mean, but then we should see a clear response on July 15th on this, right?
Yes.
Like you don't expect
we'll have a
to
proposal.
be left. Yeah.
And there are always going to be, little nuances here and there, how exactly. And of course, things evolve also, because now it's also CORSIA implementation. It's not anymore the time where CORSIA is being developed, which was the big part of the time where the kind of threat kept being kind of put out there. And then, the next iteration of the legislation was agreed, and then yet another review coming up in the future. So I've seen so many of these cycles already. That's why I don't think there's a real threat there today. But maybe someone will prove me wrong. Maybe the proposal will prove me wrong. I'm fine with that as well.
Because I think CORSIA, maybe less for durable removals, at least at the current price points, but it could actually be maybe the main market for nature-based removals. Because the price point at $20, $30, $40 per ton is actually pretty good for that. And again, I'm spending more and more time about how can we cover the whole spectrum. And what I see is that if we don't have clear answers for some segments of the market, everyone fights for the same. And that's why I've been going deeper on CORSIA again.
Yeah.
But again, there's some unanswered questions for me there.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, only one thing that came to my mind when you started talking about CORSIA was how recently I read a report, I don't remember which one, that made a very, very serious case that CORSIA is not a compliance market and is a voluntary market because participation in it is voluntary. And I was just surprised to read that because I think of CORSIA also as a compliance market. Can't remember on top of my head which report it was, but it wasn't a niche little thing. It was an important piece of paper.
But then compliance requires enforcement, right? So
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
That's a wrap. 2 more topics we didn't get to, but I'll keep that for the
Oh,
next time.
really?
They're not time sensitive.
You always have a long list. I love it. I hope I have a longer one next time.
Well, we'll do it again in 3 months.
Yeah.
This was fun as always. Thank you, Ebbe.
Thanks, Sebastian. Bye.